No one remembered why the war started. It was too far back even for the machines. Records said it began with a misunderstanding, then a retaliation, then a genocide, and then another. Every species blamed the others. Alliances formed, fell apart, reformed, collapsed. Again, but somehow in the chaos the humans made the galaxy bleed, and then, just like that, they disappeared. Vanished into their own corner of space. No more skirmishes, no diplomacy, no outposts, no interference, a full retreat. They sealed their borders and left the rest of the galaxy to choke on the ashes of its own greed. They called it the Armistice, a signed agreement, witnessed by 17 ruling species and encoded into the stars themselves, pact between humans and the rest. No war, no crossing borders, no contact for 3,000 years. They kept it, at least though humans did. I was born in the final year of the Armistice, in the ruins of Europa Station orbiting Jupiter. They trained us like they knew what was coming, not like soldiers, like executioners. The difference is in the eyes. Soldiers shoot to win, executioners shoot to finish. They gave us history lessons, wrapped in classified files, names no one else dared speak anymore. Fails are Trek Dominion, you're a mind-born. The Etcher Collective, the ones who tried to erase us. We memorized every species that voted for our destruction 3,000 years ago. Then we memorized their weaknesses. We didn't say we wanted revenge. We didn't have to. We were humanity's second draft, the patient version, the cold version. So when the 3,000th year came and the clock ticked down to its last second, everyone waited. Nothing happened. No attack, no message, no sign of movement from Earth or Mars or Titan or the outer defense grid. Just silence. That was the mistake. They thought we'd gotten soft, that our silence was peace, that isolation had made us forget. They sent the first warning shot 3 months after the treaty expired, and a Seer battleship drifted just inside our border, cloaked in curious scanners, wide open, broadcasting in their mother tongue. It was the last thing they ever did. We didn't answer. We didn't warn. We erased them. Every colony screamed for aid on the same day. All signals ended in static. The galaxy watched in horror, and we smiled. I was on Black Soil Station, a forgotten weapons facility buried beneath Mercury's crust. We hadn't been told what to expect, only that when the Armistice ended, we wouldn't be soldiers anymore. We'd be weapons. I remember standing next to Commander Durich, the man who raised me, trained me, beat the hesitation out of me. We watched the stars on the hollow screen. Dozens of alien fleets mobilizing near the old neutral zones. Durich didn't flinch. They're going to push, I said. He nodded once. Let him. 3 hours later the declaration came. Galactic Assembly emergency broadcast. The treaty has been violated. Humanity has resumed hostilities. This is a formal declaration of war. The room went quiet. Then came the moment that still lives in my veins. Durich turned to us. 5 rows of operatives, born in silence, raised death. He smiled. Time to remind them why they feared us. No cheers, no applause, just quiet nods and the sound of loading weapons. Because we weren't here to fight. We were here to end the war they forgot. We won last time. We didn't wait for orders. We were the orders. Once war was declared, every outpost command went dark. No more open transmissions. No more diplomacy. That wasn't cowardice. It was doctrine. The old tactics didn't apply anymore. We weren't just fighting another war. We were fulfilling a promise older than our bones. I was deployed to Sector 19, codenamed Deadlight, a barren stretch of deep space that used to be home to the Trek Dominion, one of the first species to vote for Earth's annihilation centuries ago. They rebuilt since then, ships, stations, satellites, colonies. Their arrogance made them loud. Loud was easy to find. I was team lead for Ghost Team V4, 5 of us, bred, raised, and enhanced for stealth, destruction, and silence. No names, only code tags. I was V41, the others V42 through V45. We didn't need to speak. We knew the rhythm. We knew the choreography of death. The drop came swift, clean, and untraceable. We exited warp inside the gravity shadow of Trek's Loxus moon, a cold mining colony known more for its production than its defenses. That was their second mistake. Our boots never touched the ground. We descended via vertical drop capsules, cutting silently through the atmosphere like surgical blades. No flames, no heat. Trails, carbon-skinned and signal dead. By the time their sensors picked us up, we were already inside. V43 took the Eastern Comm relay. One shot, no alarm. V42 disabled their defense AI with a viral ghost code. I handled the central command tower. It wasn't hard. Most of them weren't soldiers. They were engineers, workers, civilians. But that didn't matter anymore. They declared war. We didn't start it, but we would make damn sure we finished it. I cleared the control room in 22 seconds. 2 Trek officers tried to surrender. They raised their claws, their frills flashing yellow, their species sign of submission. I shot both through the brain stem. We weren't here for prisoners. We weren't here for mercy. Once the area was secured, I activated the signal red eye. It was a simple code, untraceable, unencrypted, a ghost pulse sent across hundreds of human satellites hiding in dead space. A minute later, I watched from the rooftop as the sky split open. No sound, no warning. 3 orbital rail guns fired from low Mercury orbit, synced to our position by Nancon level targeting algorithms. The beams weren't visible. They were kinetic rods, solid metal spears dropped at terminal velocity. One hit the moon's central mining district. The second struck the habitat dome. The third hit their main reactor. I saw buildings lift off the ground like feathers. Shock waves rolled like liquid. Fire followed, then silence. By the time the Trek Empire scrambled response fleet, there was nothing left to save. Loxus moon was just another crater, and we were already gone. You have to understand something. This wasn't revenge. This was calibration. We weren't just exterminating enemies. We were sending messages, and the message was simple. We remember. Word spread fast. Galnet forums lit up with panic. News anchors from 20 different species tried to explain our tactics, our weapons, our silence. They couldn't, because we weren't using any of the systems they knew. No mass fleets, no grand invasions, no live streamed declarations or chest-beating speeches, no flag raising or anthem playing, just clean, deliberate destruction. One colony at a time. The Trek responded the only way they knew, by retaliating. They sent a cruiser to intercept our returning ship. We were in cryo when they caught us. That should have been the end. Their cruiser outgunned our stealth transport 20 to 1, but they didn't count on Durich's contingency. Every stealth transport carried a worm. Not a literal one, a code, the moment an enemy signal made contact with our ship. The worm activated, it injected itself into the Trek cruiser's communication protocols, then burrowed into its internal systems. By the time their boarding party entered our cryo chamber, their cruiser was already rerouted. It took their own ship 11 minutes to destroy itself from the inside out. We woke up in a debris field orbiting a broken moon, surrounded by the frozen corpses of our wood captors. I remember staring out the viewport at the drifting remains. I didn't feel pride. I didn't feel rage. I just felt ready. This was just the beginning. They thought we'd be like the other species, that we'd launch a war of conquest, build empires, establish human-run colonies, and demand subservience. That was never the plan. Humans don't want to rule. We want to be left alone. But if you wake us up, if you force us to come back into the light, we don't conquer, we burn. The second wave hit the Share Collective starport near Vega. A human drone fleet, unmanned, untraceable, slammed into their orbital yards, disabling 6 cruisers and crippling their main AI core. No human lives lost, thousands of Share dead. They accused us of war crimes. We didn't respond because if you're still using words, you're not ready for the war we're bringing. They called for diplomacy. Of course they did. The Galactic Assembly tried to stage a ceasefire summit in the neutral zone on Zenth Prime. Over 40 ambassadors from every known race showed up, even the Share. Despite the bloodbath, even the Trek still dragging behind from the moon strike. They lit candles, they wore robes, they played old recordings of the original Armistice speech like it meant something anymore. They left a chair for the human representative. We never showed, but something did. The summit building collapsed mid-ceremony. No explosive, no ship, just a sudden gravitational implosion, pinpoint, focused like a black hole sneezing. Inside the hall, no survivors, no message, just the chair untouched in the wreckage. They stopped asking for talks. After that, I remember the briefing before Operation Black Seed. Durich stood before us, older than most, half machine from the war that gave him his reputation. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, gravity. There will be no peace this time, he said, pacing slowly. You understand that, don't you? We nodded. We gave them a second chance. 3,000 years of silence. We built gardens out of our graves. We gave them the illusion of safety. He stopped in front of me. And now they think we're cruel. They think we're monsters. What do you think we are? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He smiled faintly. Good, because the truth is we're not monsters. We're just efficient. He turned away, voice cold. And when this is over, there won't be enough left of them to even write it down. That night I stood alone on the outer deck of our cruiser, watching the stars. Through the reinforced glass, I thought of the stories we were told as kids, about peace, about unity, about the galaxy finally coming together after centuries of blood. They were lies. The truth was simpler. They feared us then. They forgot why, and now we're here to remind them. 3,000 years of silence was long enough for the galaxy to forget the smell of burning cities. They remembered statistics, memorials, peace treaties signed on diplomatic vessels orbiting dead planets, but they forgot what it was like to fear. They forgot what it was like to see Earth angry, and that was the galaxy's final mistake. They thought we were gone. No, we were waiting. The operation, called Black Seed, wasn't a battle plan. It was a reintroduction, a statement, a reminder that silence isn't peace, it's preparation, and we had prepared perfectly. The mission was simple, not to destroy, not to invade, but to leave a mark so deep it would live in the genetic memory of our enemies for generations. Durich assigned me to lead the op, not because I was the best. I wasn't. V-42 could kill faster. V-44 had better tactical vision. V-45 was a demolitions artist, so good he could collapse a bunker by humming near it. But I had something else. I remembered everything. I still had the name of my great-grandfather burned into my skin, a man who died not in combat, but in one of the peace camps run by the Share Collective back when they were purging Earth's gene line under the guise of biological equilibrium. Peace was just another name for their genocide. I didn't want medals. I wanted them to remember us properly, not as diplomats, not as traitors, not as one of the many species struggling to survive in the galactic ecosystem. I wanted them to remember why they signed the Armistice in the first place. Black Seed's target was the archive city of Halris, located in deeper territory, one of the few places untouched by war, a protected site, neutral by ancient galactic law. That law was dead. They kept records there, entire living libraries of digital thought, histories, genetic memory banks, species archives, and diplomatic lineage trees. It wasn't a military target, not directly, which made it perfect, because wars aren't just about who dies, they're about what gets remembered. We went in through the underground aquifers. V-42 and V-44 breached through the water vents beneath the structure, while IN V-43 infiltrated via Zerorov lift shaft from a maintenance ring a kilometer out. No alarms, no resistance. We moved like shadows, not a single bullet fired, not a single body left behind. Halris was beautiful in a sterile, artificial way, long corridors of glass and living metal, floating archivist synthetic minds, barely sentient, tasked with preserving the culture of over 300 species. One of them drifted by as I planted the charge. Beneath the main data stem, it paused, its voice soft and oddly human. Are you here to contribute to memory, or take from it? I looked up. I'm here to remind it what fear feels like. Then I detonated the seed. We didn't use fire. Fire was too kind. We used a custom-engineered neurological virus called Ember. Not for people, for data. It infected the records, altered genetic repositories, deleted historical truths, and rewrote galactic memory in silence. One by one, archives blinked out. They didn't just lose their history, they lost themselves. Whole species would wake up the next day with nothing. No proof of birth, no ancestral path, no cultural anchor, no political legitimacy, no historical leverage. Just blank pages where their empires used to be, and in their place we left ours. We embedded just one memory. Every system we erased, the sight of a human man standing in a burned field, smiling with blood on his hands. They'd remember us, not as victims, as the monsters they made. The fallout was instant. Escher leadership collapsed in on itself within hours. Rival species accused them of fabricating their own destruction. Mass panic swept across their colonies. False histories began to surface. Political leaders found themselves erased from records, entire governments retroactively invalidated, civil wars ignited before any weapon was fired. We didn't kill them, we just made them forget who they were. It was beautiful, and it was only the beginning. When I got back to Regent Station, Dirk met me on the docking platform. He looked older, he always did. Maybe it wasn't the years, maybe it was the weight of remembering what so many others tried to forget. He didn't speak for a long time, just stared at me as the heat from my dropship hissed into the void. Finally he said, "You rewrote the future." I didn't know if it was approval or disappointment, so I asked him, "Do you regret it?" He laughed, short and broken. "Regret's a luxury for people who had a choice." He turned and walked. I followed. We didn't have homes anymore. Earth still existed, of course, but not as a planet. It was a fortress. Now, a sealed world behind orbital defense rings and magnetic lattice walls. No one got in, not even us. It had become symbolic, the heart of the Armistice, the last place our enemies saw before the bombs stopped falling. They were terrified of Earth, but they never bombed it again, not because they couldn't, because of the last message they ever received from our capital. Just one phrase, broadcast across every open galactic channel: "If you strike us, we will not respond. We will erase your stars from the sky." They believed it. They should have, because they did strike once long ago. And now the stars were starting to disappear. In my quarters I kept an old piece of tech, a relic, a playback chip from before the Armistice. It contained a single recording, a speech my great-grandfather's voice smuggled out of the peace camp moments before the Escher guards burned it to the ground. "We are not here to beg, we are not here to cry, we are here to bury our dead, and when the stars align, to let the galaxy feel what it means to truly be remembered." I listened to it every night before a mission. I wasn't a hero, I wasn't a soldier, I was just a man with too many ghosts and too good a memory. Not all humans agreed with the war. There were those who wanted to rebuild, who wanted peace, but they didn't speak loud, not anymore. Because for every colony we lost, every child who died in orbit, every family line that vanished into the vacuum, there had to be a price, and if the galaxy wouldn't name it, we would. Dirk's next assignment came down without a word, just a coordinates drop and a brief line of instruction. They remember now, time to make them never forget. Our next target wasn't military, it was sacred. A temple moon called Ura, orbiting a dead star, untouched by war for 5,000 years, shared territory, galactic holy ground. Pilgrims of every species traveled there, including humans. Once it was where they signed the original Armistice. Now it was where we'd end its memory for good. We didn't bomb it, we lifted it. Every nanotech drone we'd developed over the last 3 millennia converged on the moon's crust like ants eating the bones of a corpse. They dismantled it atom by atom until it was no longer a moon, no longer sacred, just dust floating where history used to be. The galaxy screamed. Religious factions declared holy war. Political unions shattered. Alliances folded overnight. No one trusted anyone anymore, and through it all we stayed silent, watching, smiling. There's a difference between exile and self-isolation. The galaxy told itself that Earth went into hiding after the Armistice, licking its wounds like a wounded animal. They convinced themselves we were afraid of them, that we were shamed by what we'd done in the Great Collapse, that we'd left because we couldn't take the guilt. Let them believe that, let them dream, because the truth about Earth wasn't exile, it was containment. But not for our protection, for theirs. It started centuries ago, while the Armistice was still fresh, while the rest of the galaxy tried to pretend they hadn't nearly wiped out an entire species and called it peace, while they celebrated their diplomatic victory. Humanity did what it always does when backed into a corner. We adapted, we built walls, not the kind you see, the kind you feel. By the end of the first century of silence, Earth was no longer a planet, it was a code, a living weapon behind a firewall of satellites, energy veils, AI-controlled defense grids, and orbital fortresses. Nothing came in, nothing got out. We called it the lock, and only one man held the keys. Durich. When I was summoned, it wasn't by request, it was a summons, non-negotiable. A direct priority override tagged red. Return to origin. Every human operative in the galaxy knew what it meant. It meant Earth was calling you home, whether for punishment, promotion, or purpose. You didn't say no, you returned. My ship, the Vulture's blade, dropped out of jump space near Jupiter. We didn't head straight to Earth, that would be suicide. You had to wait, float in the approved orbit until the lock decided you were real. A million tests began the moment we entered the zone. Biological verification, neurological scans, memory sweeps. They made sure you were who you said you were, because after 3,000 years, it wasn't just aliens who wanted to get into Earth. There were humans who'd forgotten what it meant to earn it. I was cleared after 2 days. That was fast, probably because of Durich, or maybe because the lock wanted me back. The transport that took me through the final approach was empty, black, silent. No windows, just a seat, one single seat. You don't get to see Earth from above anymore. They don't want you to look down and feel pride. They want you to feel humility, to remember that your home is a privilege, not a birthright. The door opened into shadow, not darkness, calculated low light. Everything inside the fortress was designed to preserve power, reduce noise, and keep attention low. The walls breathed, literally carbon adaptive walls that absorbed vibration, sound, heat, memory. Every step was a whisper. Dirk met me at the threshold. No words, just a nod. He led me through a hallway that didn't exist, not on any map, not in any schematic. And then we reached it, the core, the room that controlled the lock, the room where Earth watched the stars. It was huge, circular, every inch covered in transparent screen showing live feeds from across the galaxy, battles, protests, Escher funeral processions, Trek news feeds, artificial suns being swallowed by our drones, and in the center a platform, on it a single chair, ancient, wooden, carved by hand. No one sat in it. No one had to. Dirk stood beside it, his voice low. They've begun the Unity Protocol. I frowned. That's not possible. It is when they realize we're not going to stop. The Unity Protocol was their last resort, a galaxy-wide merger of military power, former enemies becoming allies. Trek and Isher, Yura and Danak, all working together to forge a weapon strong enough to match the human threat. It was a panic response. I smirked. So they're scared. Dirk didn't smile. No, they're desperate, and desperation Makes creatures dangerous, even smart. Once he stepped forward and looked me. Dead in the eyes, they think we're. Fractured, they think you're the key to. Proving that. That's when I understood, Black Seed. Wasn't the mission. I was. They didn't just want to an NBSP and NBSP. The enemy's memory. They wanted to test. Mine, see if I'd flinch, see if the blood on my hands would rot my conscience. It hadn't, but that meant something else. I was now the symbol of what they feared most, a human without remorse, a weapon without hesitation. I didn't know whether to feel honored or cursed. Dirk walked me deeper into the core. The next chamber was filled with preserved things, artifacts, relics, trophies, a twisted archive of the Armistice age, and in the center, floating in containment, the last living Trek ambassador from the original piece. A cord alive, kept in stasis. A relic of lies. Durich gestured to him. We kept him for leverage, thought maybe we'd use him if the war came again. I stared through the glass. Ambassador's face was old, frilled, dried out like a husk. His eyes blinked. Slowly he saw me, he knew. But now, Dirk said, we don't need leverage, we just need a message. I didn't hesitate. I walked forward and placed my palm on the kill pad. A hiss. A flicker, the containment pod depressurized in under 4 seconds. His body crumpled inward, skin folding like paper in a vacuum. No scream, no struggle, just silence. Durich nodded. They'll know we left his neural tags intact. The death signal's already spreading. I turned away. What's the next move? The next move was Earth itself. The galaxy assumed Earth was untouchable. They were right, but they thought we were hiding behind it like cowards. They didn't understand. Earth wasn't our sanctuary, it was our fuse, and now it was time to light it. The plan was called Ashwake. No one said it aloud. It lived only in coded fragments, and it was only activated if 3 criteria were met. 1. Galactic forces unify into a single front. 2. They bring war to Earth's doorstep. 3. Humanity no longer cares about being forgiven. All 3 had happened. The Unity fleet had mobilized. Over 1,000 warships flagged from 17 species, moving toward Earth slowly, cautiously, still thinking maybe we'd blink. We wouldn't. Durich sent me to the outer wall, a structure that circled the Earth like a ring of knives. Each shard of it held technology the galaxy had never seen. Some of it wasn't even human, because in our silence we'd evolved. We didn't just survive, we outgrew the galaxy. Galaxy saw us as the past, but Earth had become something else. Something future. I walked the wall. Alone, each step felt like stepping across time. Statues lined the corridor. Soldiers, scientists, children, names carved beneath them. Millions of names. All the ones we lost, all the ones we buried. I stopped at one, my brother's. He died on Europa, defending a civilian shuttle from a pirate raid 200 years ago. He wasn't a soldier, just a mechanic, but when the pirates broke in, he locked the engine room and overcharged the core. Killed them all, including himself. That's who humanity is. We don't win by being better, we win by being willing. When I returned to the core, Durich was already connected to the planetary relay. The screen showed the Unity fleet, now 3 hours from the edge of Earth's defense zone. He looked at me. Final chance, he said. You tell me no, I shut it down. We fall back. We go quiet again. I shook my head. no more hiding. He stared for a long moment, then activated the link. Unity Fleet, this is Earth Command. You have violated sovereign space and engaged in hostile mobilization. This is your only warning. Turn back now or be treated as enemy combatants. You have 10 seconds to comply. The fleet's response came quick. Earth Command, this is Admiral Kish of the Galactic Unity. Your threat is received and recorded. We do not fear extinction. Surrender now or face annihilation. I smiled coldly. You don't fear extinction, but you should fear memory. Durich gave the signal. 10 seconds later, the stars began to vanish, one by one. The Unity Fleet warships disappeared, not with explosions, not with screams. They were unwritten, reversed, rewound, deleted. Ashwake wasn't a weapon, it was a reset. A system designed to wipe not just matter but history, because in the end, we understood the galaxy's weakness, not biology, not weaponry, not ships, time. And now time belonged to us. They never stood a chance, not because we had more ships, we didn't, not because we had more numbers, we were outnumbered 100 to 1, not even because we had better technology, though. After 3,000 years in the dark, we damn well did. No, they lost because they came to fight a war. And we didn't bring one, we brought a raider. The Unity Fleet was gone. In seconds, wiped off the galactic map. No debris, no wreckage, no black box signals, nothing but empty space where 1,000 warships had floated seconds before. And not just their ships, their memory of it vanished too. Species across the galaxy woke up to a sudden hole in their timelines. No logs, no alerts. They couldn't remember why they'd mobilized, couldn't remember where their best admirals had gone, couldn't remember the name of the battle they were preparing to win. Some panicked, others denied it ever happened. The share called it a glitch in the neural stream. The Trek blamed a rogue AI. The Drenak accused one another of sabotage. All lies, all desperate, because no one could admit the truth. Humanity was rewriting reality. Inside Earth's core command, I stood beside Durich as the last of the feeds cut to static. Ashwake had worked flawlessly. Every ship that passed into the locks perimeter was now trapped in a suspended state, buried in fragmented time loops, erased from living memory, but still technically alive somewhere, nowhere. Always. Dirk didn't speak for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. We've gone too far. I turned. You think that now? He looked at me, and for the first time in decades, I saw the exhaustion behind his eyes. They don't even know what they've lost, what we took. How could they fight back? He wasn't asking for permission to stop. He was wondering if it mattered anymore. That's the cost of this kind of war. We weren't conquering, we were deconstructing, erasing names from history, planets from star maps, bloodlines from memory cores, and the galaxy, it was losing its mind. News feeds turned schizophrenic. Memories conflicted across species. Entire governments fell when they couldn't remember their own elections. One civilization, the Ura mind-born, imploded completely. Their mental network collapsed after its central knowledge sphere went blank overnight. They tore each other apart, blaming internal corruption. They never knew it was us. We didn't need to lift a finger. Their own minds would do it for us. But even then, even when the galaxy trembled, a few tried to fight. A few Remembered there was one species older than even our oldest records, the Veracy. They didn't keep data in machines. They used genetic memory etched into their bone marrow, passed down like scars. HFY didn't touch them. They remembered everything, and they hated us for it. We first noticed their interference on the fringe colonies. Places we hadn't struck yet. They didn't send armies, they sent prophets. Veracity memory bearers, tall skeletal creatures that spoke in harmonic pulses. They would land in silence, touch the ground, and every sentient mind in the vicinity would remember a version of events fabricated, rewritten, but believable. In their memories we were the monsters. Earth was a myth, and the Armistice had never happened. It was brilliant. They were trying to outplay us at our own game, not just by remembering the past, but by changing it before we could erase it. Durich knew the threat immediately. If they spread that memory, the galaxy might rally again, so we gave them a new job. I was assigned to a new squad, V5. Null, a ghost unit. We weren't assassins, we were editors. Wherever they Veracy spread their memory, we followed, and we deleted it. Not just them, not just the people who heard them. We deleted everything that touched their rewritten story, whole towns, ships, family lines. I remember a girl, maybe 13, maybe less, staring at me while her village burned behind her. Her mind still held the lie, the veracity lie. I told myself it wasn't her fault. Then I shot her, no hesitation, not because I wanted to, because she would have spread it after the third operation. I stopped speaking to the others, even the ones who didn't mind the blood, because something inside me had started to ask a question I couldn't ignore. What if we were becoming the lie? What if the monsters the Veracy painted, their rewritten histories, weren't made up? What if we were already them? I didn't voice it, not to Dirk, not to the unit, but I knew he felt it too. He just carried it differently in his silence, in his fatigue, in the way he didn't watch the executions anymore. Maybe he was counting down the days until someone erased us. We discovered the Veracy base on a dead moon, orbiting a collapsed neutron star. They'd been transmitting encrypted memories using biological spores carried through solar winds, infecting nearby species, embedding rewritten history into living tissue. It was genius, and it had to die. We infiltrated through the magnetic fields, cloaked, no resistance. Inside the caves, we found memory clusters, half-living, pulsating, full of stolen faces and invented tragedies. They showed Earth as a burning tyrant, our soldiers as demons, mothers torn from their children, planets shattered for sport, laughing human commanders watching the galaxy bleed. The worst part, it wasn't entirely false, just reassembled truths twisted into knives, real events bent just enough to cut. We torched it. All of it, burned the clusters, killed the bearers, bleached the air. Nothing left but ash and echoes. But as we left, one of them, old, wounded, dying, locked eyes with me. He didn't beg, he didn't curse, he just said in that pulsing, hollow voice, "You can kill memory, but you can't kill meaning." And then he died. That night I stood alone outside the transport bay, helmet off, letting the cold bite my face. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt numb. The stars above were quiet. Too quiet. I thought of my brother, my father, my people. Would anyone remember them? Would anyone remember me? Or would We all vanish into the same fog we unleashed on others. Back on Earth, Dirk met me at the gate. He didn't speak, just handed me a chip. We intercepted this. I slotted it into my neural reader, a child's drawing scanned from a refugee camp on a fringe world. It showed a smiling Earth, not burning, not evil, just watching, silent. Beneath it a child had written, "The humans will come and they'll take everything, but I'm glad because we took from them first." I looked at Dirk. Do they understand us now? He shook his head. No, but they understand why. They thought we were trying to win a war, but you don't win a war when no one remembers the score. You don't conquer when the map keeps erasing itself. You don't negotiate when your enemy no longer has a name, and that was the point. But when you start tearing away everything, memories, people, culture, history, eventually there's nothing left to burn but yourself. Earth had gone quiet, not silent like before, when the stars whispered about our absence. This was different. This was a heavy quiet, a kind that listened like something deep beneath the crust had started breathing and didn't want to be interrupted. I felt it the moment I stepped into the cradle, the underground heart of Earth, where the old codes were written and buried. Durich brought me there without explanation, just said, "You need to see it." So I followed him down through corridors that hadn't been walked in centuries, through blast doors sealed, languages no longer spoken, through the narrow throat of Earth's last secret. The cradle wasn't beautiful. It was ugly in a sacred kind of way. Raw steel, cracked stone, walls lined with bone, memory tech that hummed like it was dreaming, and in the center, resting a containment cradle of frozen light, was the child. That's what they called her, not because she was young. She wasn't. She looked maybe 18, maybe older, but she was grown. Wrong. Engineered, designed, sculpted out of DNA and grief and vengeance. Durich said nothing as we stood before her. I stared. She didn't move, didn't blink, but I could feel her watching me. Every inch of my skin burned like I was being judged by something older than law. "Who is she?" I asked. Dirk's voice was flat. "She what's left." I frowned. "Of what? Of us?" The child came. Silence was the final project of Earth's core, AI, built in the 2nd century of the Armistice, born from the genetic data of every soldier who died in the Great Collapse, every scientist who vanished in the Purge, every child erased in the first waves. She wasn't a clone. She was a memory made flesh, and she had one purpose. Durich looked at me. When we activated HFY, we tripped the contingency. I turned to him slowly. "The Omega Protocol." He nodded. "She's the end game. If we fail, if Earth falls, if we are compromised, she activates." I stared at her, at the stillness, the emptiness in her eyes. "What does she do?" Dirk didn't blink. "She becomes the only human left." It wasn't a fail-safe. It was a restart. If we lost, if the galaxy finally outmatched us, outnumbered us, outlasted us, then Earth wouldn't leave behind ruins or heroes or flags. It would leave behind one perfect survivor, genetically encoded to remember everything, not as a story, but as a weapon. Silence wouldn't rebuild civilization. She'd end it one star at a time. I didn't speak on the way back up. What could I say? We weren't just playing God anymore. We were preparing to replace ourselves with one, and it was starting to feel less like strategy and more like suicide. The galaxy wasn't quiet anymore, not since the Veracity Incident, someone, no one knew who. Leaked footage of their stasis tombs. Human operatives torching memory vaults. Executions, HFY tech vaporizing. Identity cores, it spread like a virus. And the species who once stood silent now began to scream, not at us but at each other. The Drenak accused the share of selling them out. The Trek executed half their diplomatic council in panic. Smaller species began to riot, claiming humanity had infiltrated their leadership, rewriting policies from the inside. Even the Galactic Assembly fell apart one by one. Delegates disappeared, some erased, others simply broke. Couldn't tell who they were, couldn't remember what side they were on. Some killed themselves, others never found, but not all resistance died. With memory, there was one last move we didn't expect. They built a weapon, not a ship, not a gun, not another AI. They built a mirror, the Verisi, before we wiped their core, seeded a protocol into allied minds, buried beneath normal thought, designed to activate when enough memory gaps aligned. It was a memory virus. It didn't attack systems. It didn't rewrite facts, it reminded. And when it hit critical mass, species across the galaxy suddenly remembered everything: the war, the armistice, the betrayal, the silence, the executions, and the pain we caused. It spread like wildfire, infecting minds, reactivating trauma, syncing with their core neural biology like it had always been there. They remembered the truth, not our truth, theirs. I got the alert in the middle of a zero-hour debrief. Every screen across the outpost flickered, and then names of their dead. Thousands, millions, voices screaming in languages long deleted. Images of Earth ships executing unarmed diplomats, human soldiers walking through burning colonies. Children screaming beneath white-hot sky. Bursts. It wasn't false. It wasn't twisted. It was real. The truth we buried. Operatives began to falter. Some refused missions, others froze during deployments. One turned his weapon on his own squad and whispered, "We are the virus now," before pulling the trigger. I sat alone in the mess hall, watching the feed loop over and over. Dirk entered quietly. He sat beside me. "They've started remembering." I nodded. "Are we still winning?" He looked tired. "If memory is the battlefield, we've lost control of the terrain." Ashwake was supposed to be permanent. But memory is a living thing. You can't just erase pain. You have to replace it with something stronger. We didn't. All we left behind was fear, and now they were turning it into fire. We received word 2 hours later. Unity reborn, a new fleet, smaller but unified, and this time they weren't coming to fight Earth. They were coming to talk, to surrender. Some said to beg, others hoped, but Dirk knew better. He stood before the council, what was left of it, and spoke 3 words that froze every bloodline. In the room, they want silence. They didn't want victory. They wanted insurance, a way to keep Earth from ever using her, a way to put the weapon back in the box, maybe even to raise her themselves, turn the last human into a galactic asset, a tool of peace. They were offering terms: peace, forgiveness, reintegration, and all we had to do was give them our last memory. Durich turned to me that night, handed me the kill switch, one push and she never wakes up. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't have to. This war had never been about orders. It was about what we were willing to become. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chamber watching her breathe beneath the light. She looked like a girl. But I knew what she really was. She was. Our sin made flesh. If I let her wake, she'd destroy them all. If I ended her, we'd finally be alone, empty, clean. Maybe that was the point. But just before dawn she opened her eyes, not because of the kill switch, not because of any signal, just because. She knew. She looked at me, and in a voice that wasn't a voice, she asked one question: do you want to be remembered or forgiven? I didn't have an answer, still don't. She stood in the light, not blinking, not moving, barefoot on the cold steel, her white hospital-like robe clinging to her too thin frame. The containment chamber had released her. The moment she opened her eyes, no codes entered, no command spoken. She simply woke up and the world changed. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. The room felt heavier, not like gravity, more like consequence. Silence, I said. Do you know who you are? She didn't answer with words. Her head tilted slightly, and her eyes, those unnatural silver irises, watched me like I was something to be studied. Then she spoke, not like a girl, not like a child, like 1,000 voices whispering at once from beneath the skin of reality. I am the last truth. I stepped back, not in fear, in understanding. She wasn't here to be loved. She wasn't born to lead. She was built to remember. Everything we destroyed, everything we'd erased, every moment of agony we refused to carry, she was our reckoning. Durich arrived minutes later. One look at her and I saw the regret hit him like a hammer. He didn't bow, didn't salute, just stood there, hands clenched behind his back. She turned to him, and I swear, for a second her face softened, not like a daughter seeing her father, but like a knife recognizing its maker. They want her, I said, unity reborn. They're offering peace, a seat at the table, a future. Dirk didn't look away from her. They don't want peace. They want to rewrite her before she rewrites them. He was right. If they got her, she'd become another symbol, another tool of diplomacy. Her memory, her raw, perfect archive would be stripped, twisted, packaged for history books, and everything we did would be rebranded as a tragic misunderstanding. The wars, the silence, the vengeance, the fire, all reduced to footnotes in a galaxy desperate to feel good about itself again. We have to decide, I said. Durich turned to me. No, you have to. He held up the 2 keys, one black, one white. Black to activate her fully, white to neutralize her forever. No one else has earned the right. I wanted to scream. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be the one to decide the fate of our species. I wasn't a general. I wasn't a philosopher. I was just a man with good memory and too much blood on his hands. But maybe that's why it had to be me, because I remembered not just the war, but the weight of it. Silence stepped forward. Her voice, when she used only one this time, was soft. Will you choose mercy because you want it, or because you fear remembering why you don't deserve it? That one hit like a rail gun to the chest. I turned away. Couldn't meet her gaze, not yet. So I left the chamber, and I walked Earth. It was dawn on the African plate, what used to be the old continent, now a terraforming hub and a garden built from pain. Every tree, every river, every stone placed with blood had been spilled. Memorials lined the hills, names etched in nano steel, digital faces whispering stories to anyone who stopped to listen. And they listened, even now, centuries later. Humanity walked among its ghosts, not to mourn but to remember. I found An old man feeding birds in a reconstructed ruin, a cathedral-like skeleton half sunk in the red soil. He didn't flinch when I approached, just looked at me with eyes that had seen too much war to fear it anymore. You came to ask if we deserve to survive, he said before I even spoke. I paused, he smiled bitterly. They always come to me before they decide. Decide what if it's better to let us die as monsters, he tossed some crumbs, or live as hypocrites. I sat with him, didn't speak, just watched the birds pick crumbs off the bones of history. Silence found me that night. She wasn't following me, she just appeared like she was tied to every step I took. She sat beside me on the old stone bench, knees tucked to her chest, like a child, except she wasn't, not anymore. Not ever. I've seen it all, she whispered. I didn't answer. I watched your ancestors burn galaxies, then cry for the dead. Still I said nothing. They weren't heroes, she said, but they weren't cowards either. I nodded. No, they were just human. And I finally asked her what I hadn't dared until then. What will you do if I set you free? Her head turned. I will remember perfectly. And then what? Then I will let the galaxy choose what to do with that truth. It wasn't an answer, it was a mirror. She wasn't vengeful, she wasn't merciful, she was exact, pure, unfiltered memory. The war, the armistice, the silence, the fire. All of it. If she lived, the galaxy would see the truth. All of it. No twisting, no deletion, no narrative. Just raw history in its most brutal form. I returned to the core. Durich waited silent. The two keys rested in my hands. White mercy, black memory. One would bury the truth forever. The other would expose it to galaxy still bleeding from what it remembered. I didn't flip a coin, didn't pray, didn't look at silence. I just listened to the ghosts in my blood, to the burning children in orbit, to the forgotten heroes buried beneath time, to the billions we erased, to the billions who tried to erase us. And I made my choice. I chose black. The chamber pulsed once, just once, as the activation rippled through the system. Silence stood in the center, eyes closed, arms open, and then the world changed. She didn't scream, didn't rise into the air or explode into light. She just existed, and the stars bent around her. Every hidden file, every erased memory, every secret atrocity came rushing back, not just to Earth, to the entire galaxy. It wasn't a broadcast, it was a resonance, a memory quake that shattered the silence we'd built and poured it raw and bloody into every living mind. I collapsed. The weight of it all, every name, every scream, every plea for mercy, ripped through me like fire, and I wept. Durich dropped to his knees. He didn't speak, didn't resist. He just let it come. And across the stars it began. Aliens froze mid-sentence. Political leaders collapsed in sobs. Mothers held their children like they were about to be taken. Soldiers dropped weapons and begged invisible ghosts for forgiveness, because now they all remembered not just their pain, ours too, the full picture. Some screamed for revenge, others for mercy. Some wanted to rebuild, others wanted to burn it all down. But the important part, they were all remembering the same story at last. Silence stood at the center of it all, still and waiting, like a loaded gun on a table shared by enemies. And we were no longer in control. It began in a whisper, not a sound. There was none, not a broadcast. She didn't need one, but a pulse that moved like light across the void. Silence had awakened, and the galaxy would never sleep again. What happened next wasn't war. There were no battles, no ships moving into formation, no orders barked across starfields, no final stand, just the truth, raw, unfiltered, eternal. Memory as a weapon, and no one, not one species, had a shield strong enough to survive it. The Veresi were the first to fall, not to guns, not to fire, but to clarity. They prided themselves on knowledge, on memory. They believed history made them immortal, but when silence uncoiled her archive, when every moment they had forgotten came back, they shattered. They remembered the votes they cast, the children they condemned, the camps they funded, the genocide they justified with cold logic and philosophical detachment. They remembered human screams, and more terrifying than that, they remembered their own laughter in response. Some Veresi took their own lives in mass rituals, others set their cities ablaze, hoping the fire would erase what silence had made eternal. The usher followed. Soon after, their colonies erupted in chaos, youth blaming the elders blaming forgotten governments. In a single night, their genetic purity council was executed by its own guards. The soldiers who pulled the trigger were crying. They didn't want to kill, but they remembered, not rumors, images. Flesh melting under sonic whips. Eyes pulled from children under compliance testing, human skin turned into trophies, and worse, the policies that made it legal everywhere. Species remembered what had been taken from us, but they also remembered what we'd taken. In return, human warship slicing through retreating fleets, entire systems erased, Ashwake eating memory and history alike, children erased. Before they could speak, we had become monsters, but they had made us, and now they all knew it. The galaxy fell into a silence even deeper than the one we had given it for 3,000 years. This silence was not made of fear. This silence was made of knowing. The silence after an argument you realize you lost centuries too late. The silence after a wound starts bleeding, and you know you won't stop it. The silence of staring at a mirror and seeing something inhuman. Looking back on Earth, silence stood alone in the hall of ghosts. The digital walls around her flickered with the faces of every life lost in the war. Not just humans, all of them. Verasi, Etcher, Drenok, Trek, Yura, human. She made no speech. She had no closing words. She just showed them, and they wept. There was no treaty, no vote, no announcement, but slowly across the galaxy weapons were deactivated, fleets returned to their ports. No one ordered it, they just stopped. Because what was left to fight for? No one wanted to own the future anymore. They just wanted to survive the past. Humanity didn't celebrate. How could we? We hadn't won. There was no victory in this, only exposure. Only the great, endless grief of knowing you were right, but knowing that rightness cost you everything. Dirk died 2 weeks after activation. Collapsed quietly in his quarters, heart failure. Some say he saw a vision in his final moments. That silence visited him and showed him something no one else had seen, a future where it all played out differently, where we forgave, where we never erased, where we let the pain breathe instead of burying it. He died with a small smile on his face, the first real one I'd ever seen from him and me. I left Earth. Silence told me I could, that I had earned peace, but I didn't go far. I stayed just past the reach of the lock, orbiting in an old rusting station above the Martian fringe, watching, listening. Sometimes alien diplomats come, not to negotiate, not to argue, but to confess. They sit across from me in the old steel room with flickering lights and broken coffee machines, and they tell me what they did during the Great Collapse, what their fathers did, what their species forgot, what they forgave themselves for too easily. They don't ask me for forgiveness. They just want someone who remembers. Silence is still active, not walking the galaxy, not ruling it, just being. She becomes whatever each world needs her to be: a child, a warrior, a teacher. Mirror, she never lies, she never edits. She never comforts, she simply shows. And that is enough. The galaxy, for the first time in its history, lives in peace, not out of love, not out of mutual respect, but out of a shared burden. A memory so vast and violent no one dares to repeat it. There's a phrase that's begun circulating across the outer colonies. No one knows who said it first, but I hear it all the time now, in marketplaces, in quiet conversations, in the hush. Before diplomats speak, the humans smiled, and the stars were never the same again. I sometimes think about using the white key. It's still on my belt. Durich never took it back. A second chance. Clean slate, but every time I reach for it, I remember the girl on Europa Station, bones charred under a fallen ceiling, the little boy in orbit over Saturn, eyes wide as the airlock opened. My brother holding a wrench like a weapon, knowing he wouldn't survive the detonation. They didn't get to forget. Why should I? The future isn't bright, but it's honest. And maybe that's better. Maybe that's what we needed all along. Not forgiveness, just the courage to remember together. So that's how it ends, not with the scream of engines, not with the flash of weapons, but with one girl standing in silence while the galaxy finally listens.